For 10 years, I covered Mom's utilities. But when she moved Uncle and his kids in with us and demanded triple payment from me, I quietly packed up and vanished. Find another sucker now. I wrote in my note, my name is Jake Martinez. And I never thought I'd be telling this story to strangers on the internet. But here I am, sitting in my new apartment, looking at the empty pizza box on my coffee table, trying to make sense of the last 10 years of my life. Sometimes you think you know people. Sometimes you think family means something. Sometimes you're dead wrong about both. It all started when I was 23, fresh out of college with a business degree and a head full of dreams. I'd landed a decent job at a marketing firm in downtown Phoenix. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. My mom, Sandra, had been struggling since Dad passed away when I was 19. She'd kept the house, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood where the mailboxes still had little American flags on them, and people actually knew their neighbors' names. Mom had always been proud. Too proud, maybe. She'd grown up in a generation where asking for help felt like admitting defeat, where keeping up appearances mattered more than comfort. I could see her struggling with the mortgage, the electric bills piling up on the kitchen counter like accusations. The house that had once felt warm and full of Dad's laughter now seemed too big, too expensive, too much for a woman working part-time at the local library. I remember the exact moment I made the decision. It was a Tuesday evening in March, and I'd stopped by to check on her. The thermostat was set to 62 degrees, and Mom was wearing 2 sweaters while she heated up a can of soup for dinner. When I opened the fridge to grab a soda, I saw it was practically empty except for some expired yogurt and a half loaf of bread. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice casual, how about I help out with some of the bills around here? She straightened up like I'd insulted her. Jacob Martinez, I raised you better than to think your mother can't take care of herself. I know you can, I said quickly. But Dad would have wanted us to take care of each other. Let me help with the utilities at least. Consider it rent for all those Sunday dinners and free laundry service. It took 3 more conversations and a lot of gentle persuasion. But eventually, she agreed to let me cover the electric and gas bills. $250 a month, sometimes $300 in the summer, when the Arizona heat made the air conditioner run constantly. It didn't break my budget, and it meant Mom could keep her dignity and her independence. For the first few years, our arrangement worked perfectly. I'd swing by every other weekend, we'd have dinner together, and I'd slip the utility money into the cookie jar where she kept her grocery money. Mom would protest every time, but I could see the relief in her eyes. The house stayed warm in winter and cool in summer. She started buying name-brand groceries again instead of the store brands. Little things that made a big difference. I was proud of myself, honestly. Here I was, a young guy doing right by his mom, making sure she could stay in the home she'd shared with Dad for 25 years. My friends thought I was crazy for spending so much money on her bills instead of saving for my own place. But it felt good. It felt like what a good son should do. Mom started looking healthier. She joined a book club at the library, started taking yoga classes at the community center. She'd call me with stories about her new friends, about books she'd read, about plans for her small garden. The worry lines around her eyes started to fade. For the first time since Dad died, she seemed like herself again. I was dating a girl named Ashley then, a nurse from Tucson who understood about family obligations. She'd drive up on weekends sometimes, and Mom adored her. Ashley would help in the kitchen, laugh at Mom's stories about my childhood disasters, and never once complained about the money I spent on utilities. "You're a good man, Jake," she'd tell me. "Your mom raised you right." Everything felt stable, predictable, like we'd found our rhythm and could coast like this for years. That's when Uncle Derek showed up. Derek was Mom's younger brother, the one who disappeared for 15 years and only surfaced at family funerals. He'd always been what Mom diplomatically called a free spirit, and what Dad had less diplomatically called a deadbeat. Derek had 2 kids from different relationships, Tyler and Madison, both teenagers who'd apparently been bouncing between relatives for the past year. I came over one Saturday in October to find Derek's beat-up Chevy Silverado in the driveway, packed with garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Mom met me at the door with that forced smile she wore when she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. "Jake, honey, I have some news. Derek is going through a rough patch and he needs a place to stay for a while, just until he gets back on his feet." A while, in Derek's speak, I'd learned from childhood experience, usually meant indefinitely. Derek emerged from the kitchen with a beer in his hand, and that same charming grin that had gotten him out of trouble his whole life. He was 45, but looked older, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of deep tan that came from working construction jobs under the desert sun. "Jake, look at you, all grown up and successful. Sandra's been bragging about you nonstop." He grabbed me in one of those back-slapping hugs that aggressive men use to establish dominance. "Hope you don't mind us crashing here for a bit. Just need to get the kids settled and find a new gig." Tyler and Madison were sitting on the couch, looking about as thrilled as I felt. Tyler was 16, all elbows and attitude, with earbuds permanently attached to his head. Madison was 14, quiet and watchful, with Derek's green eyes, but none of his false confidence. They both had that look kids get when they've been moved around too much, like they were ready to pack up and leave at a moment's notice. "Of course they can stay," I heard myself saying, because what else could I say with Mom standing right there, hope written all across her face? "Family helps family." Derek clapped me on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. Don't worry, this won't change anything for you. We'll figure out the money situation." But even as he said it, I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. Derek had always been good at math when it came to other people's money. The first month wasn't too bad. Derek actually seemed to be trying. He'd get up early, shower, put on clean clothes, and head out looking for work. Tyler and Madison were quiet, polite kids who kept to themselves and helped Mom around the house without being asked. Madison would do dishes after dinner, and Tyler would take out the trash without Mom having to remind him. For a brief moment, I thought maybe this could work. The utility bills that month came to $420. "Arizona's been hotter than usual," Mom explained when she showed me the electric bill. "And you know, 3 more people in the house means more showers, more lights on, more everything." It made sense. I paid the bills without complaint and told myself this was temporary. Derek would find a job, get his own place, and things would go back to normal. I was making decent money by then, had gotten a promotion and a raise. An extra $170 a month wasn't going to kill me. But Derek's job search seemed to consist mainly of sitting on Mom's back patio, making phone calls that never seemed to lead anywhere. When I'd ask how it was going, he'd launch into elaborate stories about interviews that were very promising and opportunities that were just around the corner. There was always some reason why he couldn't start work just yet. The background check was taking longer than expected. The foreman was out of town. The project had been delayed. Meanwhile, Tyler and Madison were settling into their new school, and I had to admit they were good kids despite everything. Madison was smart as a whip, getting straight A's and helping Mom with her computer when it acted up. Tyler was more of a challenge, but even he was just being a normal teenager, not the troublemaker I'd expected. It was Mom who really worried me. She was trying so hard to make everyone comfortable, cooking huge dinners every night, doing endless loads of laundry, mediating between Derek and the kids when they'd clash over typical father-teenager stuff. The light that had come back into her eyes over the past few years was starting to dim again. She's exhausted, Ashley pointed out one Sunday after we'd had dinner there. Taking care of 3 extra people is like having a full-time job on top of her actual job. I'd noticed it too. Mom was always cleaning something, always cooking something, always running to the store for things Derek needed. New work boots because his old ones had fallen apart. School supplies for the kids. Groceries that disappeared faster than ever before. The second month's utilities came to $510. The hot water heater's been working overtime, Mom explained. But she wouldn't quite meet my eyes when she said it. And Derek's been trying to save money by washing his work clothes at home instead of the laundromat. I paid it, but the knot in my stomach was getting tighter. This wasn't sustainable. And Derek's job search didn't seem to be gaining any momentum. When I tried to bring up the subject of him contributing to household expenses, Mom would get defensive. He's family, Jake. He's going through a hard time. When your father lost his job that winter, Derek sent us money to help with Christmas presents for you. Family helps family. I didn't remember that happening. But Mom's memory of family history had always been rosier than mine. Still, I kept my mouth shut and kept paying the bills. What else could I do? It was around the 3rd month that I started noticing other changes. Derek had claimed Mom's recliner as his personal throne, complete with a TV tray for his endless cans of soda and bags of chips. He'd installed some kind of gaming system in the living room, which he and Tyler would use for hours at a time, the volume cranked up so loud you could hear the explosions and gunfire from the kitchen. Mom started eating dinner in her bedroom more often, claiming she was tired or had paperwork from the library to catch up on. But I suspected she just wanted some peace and quiet in her own house. The 4th month's bill was $630. Derek got a job, Mom announced when I came over to pay it. Construction work with a crew downtown. He starts Monday. Derek was in the kitchen, looking pleased with himself as he made a sandwich that contained what looked like half a package of lunch meat. Yeah, good money too. $15 an hour to start, maybe more once they see what I can do. Don't worry, Jake. I'll start helping with these bills real soon. That's great, I said, and meant it. Maybe things were finally turning around. Derek worked for exactly 11 days before he got into what he called a disagreement with the foreman, and quit. According to Derek, the guy was an idiot who didn't appreciate Derek's 20-plus years of experience and treated his crew like children. According to Mom, who heard it from a neighbor whose husband worked for the same company, Derek had shown up late 3 times in his first week and spent more time on his phone than actually working. The job search resumed, along with Derek's permanent residency in Mom's recliner. It was around this time that I started noticing small things going missing from Mom's house. Nothing major, just little things that might be misplaced or forgotten. The good carving knife from the kitchen, Dad's old craftsman drill from the garage, a small wooden jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother. When I asked Mom about the jewelry box, she looked confused for a moment before saying she thought she'd put it somewhere safe and forgotten where. But I caught Derek and Tyler exchanging a quick look across the dinner table, the kind of look that passes between people who share a secret. The 5th month's bill was $740. I don't understand it, Mom said, staring at the paper like it might change if she looked long enough. Derek's been really careful about conservation. We've all been trying to keep costs down. but Derek had just purchased a small refrigerator for the garage, claiming he needed it for his protein drinks and energy supplements for when he got back into construction work. The garage had also acquired a space heater because Derek said it was too cold out there when he worked on his truck in the evenings. I was starting to feel like I was funding Derek's personal resort. But every time I tried to talk to Mom about setting some boundaries, she'd get upset. "He's trying, Jake. It's not easy for a man his age to start over. And the kids need stability. Madison's finally making friends at school, and Tyler's grades are improving. I can't just throw them out on the street." She was right about the kids. They were thriving, despite Derek's lackadaisical approach to parenting. Madison had joined the debate team and was talking about college applications, even though she was only a sophomore. Tyler had gotten a part-time job at a pizza place and was saving money for a car. But Derek seemed content to let Mom feed him, house him, and wash his clothes while he pursued his opportunities from the comfort of her living room. The 6th month's bill was $890. That's when Derek called the family meeting. I should have seen it coming. Derek had always been good at making his problems everyone else's responsibility, but he'd never been quite this bold about it before. He waited until a Sunday when Ashley was there too, probably figuring the presence of an audience would make it harder for me to object to whatever scheme he'd cooked up. We were all sitting around Mom's dining room table after dinner, the table that Dad had built with his own hands 30 years ago. Derek had positioned himself at the head of the table in what used to be Dad's chair, while Mom bustled around clearing dishes and pretending this was all perfectly normal. "I've been thinking," Derek began, using that serious tone he reserved for his most ridiculous ideas, "about our living situation here. Tyler and Madison were texting on their phones, probably to friends, completely unaware that their father was about to drop a bomb on the family dynamics. Mom had frozen in place near the kitchen doorway, holding a stack of dirty plates like a shield. The thing is," Derek continued, "this arrangement we have isn't really fair to Sandra. She's doing all the work of taking care of a bigger household, but the financial burden is falling on Jake here. That's not right." Ashley raised an eyebrow at me. She could sense where this was heading, even if Mom couldn't. "So, I've been looking at the numbers," Derek said, pulling out a small notebook like he was some kind of accountant instead of a guy who'd been unemployed for 3 months. "The utilities alone are running close to $900 a month now. That's not counting the extra groceries, the wear and tear on the appliances, the increased insurance costs." "Insurance costs?" I interrupted. "Well, sure. More people in the house means higher liability. Plus, the kids need to be covered under Sandra's homeowner's policy now that this is their primary residence. I checked with her insurance company. It's going to be an extra $150 a month." This was news to me, and judging by the look on Mom's face, it was news to her too. "The point is," Derek continued smoothly, "we're looking at monthly household expenses of around $1,200, maybe more. It's not fair for Jake to carry that whole load by himself." I felt Ashley's hand find mine under the table, a small anchor in what was starting to feel like a storm. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. Derek leaned back in Dad's chair like he owned it. "Well, I think we should split the costs 3 ways. Me, you, and Sandra. $400 each. That's fair, right? Everyone pays their share." The silence that followed was so thick, you could have cut it with one of Mom's good kitchen knives, if Derek hadn't already sold them. "You want me to pay $400 a month," I said slowly, "and Mom to pay $400 a month, while you pay $400 a month with money you don't have because you don't have a job." "I'm actively looking for work," Derek said defensively, "and I've got some promising leads." There's this roofing company that's really interested in my experience. Derek, Mom said quietly from the doorway, I can't afford $400 a month. You know I can't. Well, that's the beauty of family, Derek said with that smile that had charmed his way out of responsibility his whole life. Jake here can cover your share until you get back on your feet. So really, Jake, you'd just be paying $800 a month instead of $900. You'd actually be saving money. The audacity of it took my breath away. He wanted me to pay $800 a month so he could live rent-free in Mom's house while he pursued his imaginary job opportunities. And what happens when you get this job? Ashley asked, her voice carefully neutral. Will you start paying your share then? Derek waved a hand dismissively. Of course, of course. Soon as I'm earning steady money, I'll pick up my full share. Might even be able to pay a little extra to help Sandra catch up on some deferred maintenance around here. This place could use some work. That's when I noticed Tyler and Madison had stopped texting and were watching their father with expressions I couldn't quite read. Not admiration, exactly. Something more like resignation. I need to think about this, I said finally. What's to think about? Derek asked. Family is family. We all pitch in, we all benefit. That's how it works. But that's not how it worked, and we all knew it. Derek had never pitched in for anything in his life. He'd pitch ideas, pitch fits, pitch excuses, but never pitch in actual money or effort. I stood up from the table. Ashley and I should get going. I'll call you this week, Mom. Mom nodded, still clutching those dirty dishes like they were the only solid things in her universe. Derek was already reaching for the TV remote, the serious family discussion apparently over as far as he was concerned. On the drive back to my apartment, Ashley was quiet for a long time before finally speaking. You're not seriously considering this, are you? I don't know what I'm considering, I said honestly. It's Mom's house. If she wants Derek there, what can I do? You can stop enabling this, Ashley said gently. Jake, this isn't about helping your mom anymore. This is about funding Derek's retirement. She was right. But that didn't make the situation any easier. Mom had been alone for so long, and having Derek and the kids there had given her a sense of purpose again, even if it was exhausting her. How could I be the one to take that away from her? I spent the next week going over my finances, trying to figure out if $800 a month was even possible. With my rent, car payment, student loans, and regular expenses, it would mean living paycheck to paycheck with no savings, no emergency fund, no room for error. But it was Mom. She'd sacrificed so much for me growing up. If this was what she needed. I called her on Thursday to tell her I'd do it. Oh, honey, she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. I knew you'd understand. Derek's so grateful. We all are. The first month under the new arrangement, the utility bill was $1,130. I don't understand it, Mom said when she called me with the news. Derek swore he'd been conserving energy. Maybe there's something wrong with the meter. But I knew what was wrong, and it wasn't the meter. Derek had moved his mini fridge inside and bought a second one for the garage. Tyler had set up some kind of elaborate gaming computer in his room that seemed to run 24 hours a day. Madison had started taking long baths instead of quick showers. And Derek had installed powerful floodlights in the backyard for security purposes. When I suggested maybe we should have a conversation about conservation, Derek looked hurt. Jake, buddy, we're doing our best here. You can't expect us to live like we're camping. The kids need their space. Sandra deserves to be comfortable in her own home. If the bills are a little higher than expected, well, that's just the cost of having a full, happy household. A full, happy household that I was now paying $850 a month to maintain. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday in February, almost exactly 1 year after Derek had arrived. I'd driven over to Mom's house to drop off the utility money and maybe have dinner, hoping for one of those comfortable evenings we used to share before her house became Derek's personal hotel. I let myself in through the kitchen door, the way I'd been doing since I was old enough to reach the handle. The house was warm and smelled like Mom's pot roast, which should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like a mockery of all those peaceful dinners we'd shared when it was just the two of us. The living room was a disaster zone. Derek was sprawled in his recliner, surrounded by empty soda cans and chip bags, yelling at some talk show on TV. Tyler was on the couch with his laptop and about 6 different electronic devices charging around him like he was running mission control for NASA. Madison was the only one who looked up when I walked in, giving me a small smile and a wave from where she was doing homework at the dining room table. "Jake," Derek called without taking his eyes off the TV. "Perfect timing. I was just about to call you." That should have been my first warning sign. Derek never called me unless he wanted something, and he never looked that pleased to see me unless he was about to ask for a favor. "We need to have another family meeting," he announced, finally muting the TV and swiveling his chair to face me. "Some things have come up that we need to discuss." I found Mom in the kitchen, stirring the pot roast with the mechanical movements of someone who was bone-deep tired. She looked older than her 62 years, with new lines around her eyes and a stoop to her shoulders that hadn't been there a year ago. "Hi, honey," she said without much enthusiasm. "Derek wants to talk to you about the household expenses." Of course he did. We assembled around the dining room table again, the same configuration as before, except this time, Derek had brought a manila folder full of papers. He spread them out with the ceremonial importance of a lawyer presenting evidence, which should have been my second warning sign. "I've been doing some research," Derek began, "about fair market rent for a house this size in this neighborhood." Ashley wasn't there this time to hold my hand under the table. I was on my own for whatever Derek was about to spring on me. According to my research, a 3-bedroom house like this would rent for about $2,200 a month. Now, I'm not saying we should pay full market rate, because this is family. But I think it's only fair that we each contribute what we can. He pulled out a handwritten chart that looked like it had been created by a middle schooler learning about percentages. Tyler's got his part-time job now, so he can contribute $100 a month. Madison can help with household chores, which I'm valuing at $50 monthly. Sandra's already contributing by providing the house and doing the cooking and cleaning. And you and I, Jake, as the primary earners, should split the major costs. I stared at the chart, trying to make sense of the numbers he'd scribbled down. It looked like he was proposing that I pay $1,500 a month while he paid $700. $1,500, I said finally. "Well, you make more money than I do," Derek said reasonably. "I mean, I will once I land this supervisor position I'm interviewing for. But right now, you're in a better position to carry the larger share. It's only temporary." Everything with Derek was always temporary. His unemployment was temporary. His living situation was temporary. His inability to contribute anything meaningful to society was apparently temporary too, though it had been going on for over 40 years. "Derek," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "you don't have a job? You haven't had a job in 4 months. How exactly are you planning to pay $700 a month?" "That's where the family part comes in," Derek said with that infuriating smile. "You help me out until I get established, and then I pay you back with interest. It's like an investment in the family's future." Mom was staring at her hands, folded in her lap like she was praying for this conversation to end. Tyler had put in his earbuds and was pretending not to listen. Madison was openly watching the whole thing with an expression that was way too knowing for a 15-year-old kid. "So, let me understand this," I said slowly. "You want me to pay $1,500 a month, which is more than my rent at my own apartment, to live in Mom's house with you and your kids, while you pay nothing because you'll pay me back someday with imaginary money from a job you don't have. When you put it like that, it sounds bad," Derek said with a nervous laugh. "But Jake, buddy, we're family. This is what families do for each other. Your mom needs us here, the kids are settled in school, and once I get back on my feet, we'll all be better off." That's when something inside me just snapped. Maybe it was the way he kept calling me buddy like we were friends instead of relatives stuck in a toxic situation. Maybe it was the way he'd taken over Mom's house and turned it into his personal welfare system. Maybe it was seeing Mom look so defeated in her own kitchen, serving pot roast to people who treated her like a servant. Or maybe it was just the sheer, breathtaking audacity of a man asking me to pay $1,500 a month for the privilege of watching him destroy my mother's peace of mind. "No," I said. Derek blinked. "No what?" "No to all of it. No to $1,500 a month. No to $700 a month. No to this whole ridiculous arrangement where I'm basically funding your permanent vacation." "Jake," Mom said softly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder for who, Mom? Harder for Derek, who hasn't contributed a dime to this household in 10 months? Harder for you, who's working yourself to death, taking care of people who don't appreciate it? Or harder for me, who's apparently supposed to pay for the privilege of watching my family get taken advantage of?" Derek's face was getting red. "Now you listen here, Jake. I know you think you're hot stuff with your fancy job and your college degree, but family comes first. Your mom raised you better than this. My mom raised me to work hard and take care of the people I love," I shot back. "She didn't raise me to be a sucker." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain hitting the windows and the muffled explosions from Tyler's video game. Mom was crying quietly, which made me feel like the worst son in the world. But I was done pretending this was normal. "I'm not paying $1,500 a month," I said finally. "I'm not paying $800 a month. I'm not paying anything anymore. Figure it out yourselves." I stood up to leave, and that's when Derek played his final card. "Sandra," he said, his voice suddenly gentle and concerned, "maybe it's time to tell Jake about the second mortgage." Mom's face went white. "Derek, no." "Second mortgage?" I repeated. Derek had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but not enough to stop talking. "Your mom had to take out a second mortgage last year to cover some unexpected expenses. The payments are pretty steep, and with her salary from the library—" "What unexpected expenses?" I demanded. Mom was shaking now. Derek needed money for a security deposit on an apartment for him and the kids. But then the apartment fell through, and there were legal fees for Tyler's custody hearing, and Madison needed braces. "How much is the second mortgage payment?" $600 a month, Mom whispered. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Mom had been struggling with a $600 monthly payment on top of everything else, and I'd never known. All this time I'd been paying utilities while she quietly went into debt trying to keep Derek and his kids afloat. "And if Jake stops helping us," Derek continued with fake concern, "I don't know how Sandra's going to manage all these payments on her own. She could lose the house." It was blackmail, pure and simple. Derek had engineered a situation where Mom was financially dependent on both of us, and now he was using that dependence to manipulate me into continuing to fund his lifestyle. but I was done being manipulated. I walked out of that house without another word, drove home in the rain, and spent the night staring at my ceiling and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. By morning, I'd made my decision. I started quietly moving my stuff out of my apartment the next weekend, packing everything into my truck when Derek was out at one of his endless job interviews and Mom was at the library. I found a small furnished place across town, month-to-month lease. Nothing fancy, but clean and quiet and mine. On Sunday evening, I wrote a letter and left it on Mom's kitchen counter where she'd find it Monday morning after Derek had settled into his daily routine of watching TV and eating her food. The letter was short and to the point. Mom, I love you, but I won't be part of this anymore. Derek has turned you into an ATM and me into his personal bank account. The money I've been giving you was supposed to help you live comfortably, not fund Derek's permanent vacation. I've covered your utilities for almost 2 years while Derek contributed nothing but empty promises and manipulation. I'm done. Derek can figure out how to support his own kids and pay his own way. If you lose the house, it won't be because I stopped helping. It'll be because Derek never started. Find another sucker, because this one is done. When you're ready to have a relationship that isn't based on how much money I can send Derek's way, call me. Until then, I'm out. Jake. I left the letter next to the cookie jar where she kept grocery money, took one last look around the kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals, and walked away from the house I'd grown up in. 3 weeks later, Derek and the kids had moved out, and Mom called me crying. He took the TV, she sobbed, and the microwave, and some of Dad's tools from the garage. He said it was compensation for all the work he'd done around the house. What work? I asked. I don't know, Mom admitted. But Jake, I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. I was so lonely, and having them here made me feel needed again. You are needed, Mom. By me. But not as a bank. It took 6 months for us to rebuild our relationship. Mom sold the house and moved into a nice senior community where she didn't have to worry about maintenance or utility bills or unexpected relatives showing up with their hands out. She seemed lighter somehow, like she'd put down a burden she'd been carrying for too long. Derek, last I heard, was living with his ex-girlfriend's mother and still looking for that perfect job that would recognize his unique talents and pay him what he thought he was worth. Tyler and Madison both reached out to me eventually. Tyler to apologize for his father's behavior and ask for advice about college. Madison to thank me for showing her what it looked like when someone actually stood up to Derek instead of just enabling him. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their destruction. Sometimes family isn't about blood or obligation. Sometimes it's about choosing the people who actually care about your well-being instead of just your wallet. I kept the note I'd written to Mom, tucked it away in my desk drawer as a reminder. Some days I still wonder if I did the right thing, walking away like that. But then I think about Derek in that recliner, making charts about how other people should pay for his life. And I know I made the only choice I could live with. Families should lift each other up, not drain each other dry. It took me almost 2 years and way too much money to learn that lesson. But at least I learned it before it was too late. 3 years later, I was sitting in my home office, going over quarterly reports for the marketing firm where I'd recently been promoted to senior account manager, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and to the point. Jake, this is Tyler. Can we talk? It's important. 3 years had passed since Derek's midnight disappearance from Mom's house. 3 years since I'd walked away from that toxic situation and learned what it actually meant to set boundaries with family. In that time, I'd bought my own house, gotten engaged to Ashley, and built a life that didn't revolve around funding other people's poor choices. I stared at Tyler's message for a long moment, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach that came whenever Derek's family resurfaced in my life. Tyler was 21 now, no longer the surly teenager I remembered. But I couldn't shake the worry that this was somehow connected to Derek's latest scheme. Had Derek sent his son to reconnect with me as a way back into Mom's good graces? Was this the opening move in some new manipulation strategy? But then I remembered the conversation I'd had with Tyler after he'd finished basic training. How mature and self-aware he'd sounded, how grateful he'd been for the lessons he'd learned by watching the contrast between Derek's irresponsibility and my willingness to actually work for what I had. Maybe this wasn't about Derek at all. I called him back. "Jake?" Tyler's voice sounded older, steadier than I remembered. "Thanks for calling me back. I wasn't sure you would." "What's going on, Tyler? Is everything okay?" "Yeah, actually, everything's good. Better than it's been in a long time. I'm stationed at Fort Carson now, finished my first deployment last month. But I wanted to talk to you about Dad." There it was. I should have known Derek would find a way to insinuate himself back into my life, eventually. "Tyler, if Derek sent you to call me..." "He didn't." Tyler interrupted quickly. "Dad doesn't even know I'm calling you. He doesn't know I have your number. Actually, that's kind of why I wanted to talk." I settled back in my chair, curious despite myself. "Okay, I'm listening." "Dad's in jail, Jake. Has been for the past 8 months. Got arrested for writing bad checks in 3 different states. The public defender says he's looking at 2 to 5 years, depending on how the plea negotiations go." I felt a complicated mix of emotions hearing this news. Part of me felt vindicated. Derek's lifestyle of charming his way out of responsibility had finally caught up with him. Part of me felt sad for Tyler and Madison, who'd grown up with this man as their primary example of adulthood. And a small part of me, the part that remembered Derek as the uncle who used to bring me baseball cards when I was 8 years old, felt sorry for him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tyler. That must be really hard for you and Madison." "Actually, it's been kind of a relief," Tyler said, and I could hear the guilt in his voice for admitting it. "I know that sounds terrible, but Dad being in jail means he can't manipulate anyone into supporting him, can't charm his way into someone else's house and destroy their peace of mind. For the first time in my life, I know exactly where he is and what he's doing." "How's Madison handling it?" "She's doing great. Really great, actually. She's a junior at Arizona State now, studying mechanical engineering with a 4.0 GPA. She's got a partial scholarship and a work-study job in the engineering lab. She's become this completely different person since she got away from Dad's chaos." I smiled, thinking about the quiet, watchful 14-year-old I'd known and imagining her as a confident college student pursuing a demanding degree. "That's wonderful. I'm really proud of her." "The thing is," Tyler continued, "Madison and I have been talking, and we want to do something for your mom. For Sandra. We know what Dad put her through, how he manipulated her into taking out that second mortgage and nearly destroyed her financially. We want to make it right." This was not what I'd expected from this conversation. "Tyler, you and Madison don't owe Mom anything. You were kids when all that happened. Derek's choices weren't your responsibility." "Maybe not legally, but morally? Yeah, we feel responsible. Dad used us as emotional leverage to manipulate Sandra into supporting him. Every time she might have gotten tired of his freeloading, he'd remind her that we needed stability, that we were finally doing well in school, that she couldn't throw children out on the street. We were his insurance policy against consequences. I hadn't thought about it that way. But Tyler was right. Derek had weaponized his children's presence to make Mom feel guilty about setting boundaries or demanding accountability. It was another layer of manipulation I hadn't fully appreciated at the time. Madison found out about the engineering program at ASU because of Sandra. Tyler went on. She spent hours with Madison after school, helping her with math homework, encouraging her to think about college, showing her that she was smart enough to pursue whatever she wanted. Dad never did any of that. He was too busy playing video games and complaining about the job market. Mom always loved helping kids with their schoolwork. She did the same thing for me when I was growing up. And she did it for us, even while Dad was bleeding her dry financially and treating her like a servant in her own house. Madison says Sandra was the first adult who ever really believed in her, who saw her potential and pushed her to pursue it. That's why she's studying engineering now, instead of settling for whatever minimum wage job she could find after high school. Tyler paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath before continuing. We've both been saving money, Jake. I've been putting aside part of my military pay every month, and Madison's been saving everything she earns from her work-study job that doesn't go to school expenses. We want to pay Sandra back for the money Dad stole from her. All of it. I was quiet for a moment, processing what Tyler was telling me. These two kids, who'd grown up in chaos and instability, who'd been bounced between relatives and used as pawns in Derek's manipulation games, were working to pay back money their father had essentially stolen from my mother. It was the kind of integrity Derek had never shown in his entire adult life. Tyler, that's incredibly generous of you both. But the house sold 3 years ago. Mom paid off the second mortgage with the proceeds. She's financially stable now. We know that. Madison looked up the property records online. But Dad didn't just cost Sandra money, Jake. He cost her peace of mind, her sense of security in her own home, probably years of stress that affected her health. We can't give her back the time she lost dealing with Dad's drama, but we can acknowledge the debt he left behind. How much money are we talking about? $12,000. That's what we calculated Dad cost her beyond the normal utility bills you were already paying. The extra insurance, the increased food costs, the second mortgage payments she made before she sold the house, the cash he took when he left. We've got most of it saved up already. $12,000. For two young people just starting their adult lives, that was a significant amount of money. Tyler was probably making less than $30,000 a year in the Army, and Madison was living on scholarships and part-time work while pursuing a demanding degree. For them to save $12,000 to pay back a debt that wasn't legally theirs showed a level of character that Derek had never possessed. Tyler, I appreciate what you and Madison want to do, but please don't talk us out of this, Jake. We need to do this. Not for Sandra, though we want to help her too, but for ourselves. We need to prove that we're not like Dad, that we understand the difference between taking responsibility and making excuses. I understood that need, probably better than Tyler realized. My own decision to walk away from Derek's manipulation had been as much about proving to myself that I wouldn't be a victim as it was about protecting Mom from further exploitation. Okay, I said finally. But let's do this right. Don't just send Mom a check in the mail. That might worry her or make her feel guilty about accepting it. Come visit her. Explain what you're doing and why. Let her see the people you've become. Would she want to see us? We were part of the problem, even if we were just kids. Tyler, Mom never blamed you or Madison for Derek's behavior. She loved having you both there, right up until Derek made the situation impossible. I think she'd be thrilled to see how well you're both doing. We made arrangements for Tyler to visit during his next leave, and for Madison to drive up from Tempe for a weekend. I called Mom that evening to let her know Tyler had reached out and that both kids wanted to visit. "Oh my goodness, really?" Mom sounded genuinely excited. "How are they doing? Are they happy? Healthy?" I told her about Tyler's military service and Madison's engineering studies, about their maturity and their desire to make amends for Derek's behavior. Mom started crying before I finished talking. "Those poor children," she said. "They never should have felt responsible for their father's mistakes. But I'm so proud of them for turning out so well despite everything Derek put them through." The visit took place on a sunny Saturday in March. I drove over to Mom's senior community to be there when Tyler and Madison arrived, partly to facilitate the reunion and partly to satisfy my own curiosity about how they'd changed. Tyler looked completely different in his army dress uniform. Taller, broader, carrying himself with a confidence that had been completely absent when he was 16. Madison had grown into a poised young woman who radiated intelligence and determination. She'd inherited Derek's green eyes, but hers were focused and clear instead of shifty and calculating. Mom cried when she hugged them both, telling them how proud she was and how good they looked and how much she'd missed them. They sat in her small living room, catching up on 3 years of life, while Mom bustled around making coffee and arranging store-bought cookies on her good plates like she was hosting a diplomatic summit. When Tyler finally brought up the money, explaining their desire to pay back what Derek had cost her, Mom tried to refuse, just like I'd expected she would. "You children don't owe me anything," she insisted. "Your father's debts aren't your responsibility." "They're not debts," Madison said gently. "They're an acknowledgement of what you gave us when we needed it most. You provided us with stability and encouragement at a time when our own father was failing us in every possible way. That's worth far more than $12,000. You believed in me," Madison continued. "You helped me with my homework, drove me to debate team practices when Dad was too busy to bother, talked to me about college like it was actually possible instead of just a fantasy. You saw potential in me that I didn't even know I had." Tyler nodded. "And you showed me what a real family looks like, what it means when people actually take care of each other instead of just using each other. Watching Jake pay those bills every month without complaining, seeing how you worked to take care of everyone even when Dad was treating you like a servant. That taught me more about responsibility and integrity than anything Dad ever said." Mom was crying again, but they were good tears this time. "You two have grown into such wonderful adults. Your father may not have been much of a parent, but somehow you learned all the right lessons anyway." "We learned them from you," Madison said simply, "and from Jake. You showed us what it looks like when people actually live up to their commitments instead of just making excuses." They insisted on giving her the money, presenting it in a card that Madison had made herself, decorated with engineering drawings and mathematical equations that somehow managed to look artistic. Inside, they'd written a note thanking her for her kindness and expressing their hope that this small gesture could begin to repay the debt of gratitude they felt they owed her. Mom accepted the money, but only after making them promise to let her use part of it to establish college funds for any children they might have in the future. "I want this money to keep helping young people get educated and build good lives for themselves," she said. "That's the best way to honor what we all learned from this difficult situation." We spent the rest of the afternoon looking through photo albums and sharing stories about the intervening years. Tyler told us about his deployment, about the responsibility he discovered he could handle when people actually expected him to show up and do his job. Madison talked about her engineering projects, about professors who challenged her to think in new ways, about internships she was applying for at aerospace companies. Neither of them mentioned Derek directly, but his absence from their narratives was telling. They'd built their adult lives around the lessons they'd learned from his negative example, using his failures as a blueprint for the kind of people they didn't want to become. As they were preparing to leave, Madison pulled me aside. "I want to thank you too, Jake," she said, "for walking away when you did. I know it probably felt like you were abandoning Sandra, but you weren't. You were showing all of us that we didn't have to accept Dad's manipulation just because he was family. You taught us that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's self-destruction." "I wasn't trying to teach anyone anything," I admitted. "I was just trying to protect my sanity and my bank account." Madison smiled. "Maybe that's what made it so effective. You weren't preaching about responsibility and boundaries. You were just demonstrating them. Actions speak louder than lectures, especially when you're dealing with someone like Dad who's heard every excuse and rationalization in the book." After they left, Mom and I sat in her living room as the sun set outside her windows, both of us processing the emotions of the afternoon. She looked peaceful in a way I hadn't seen since before Derek had arrived on her doorstep all those years ago. "You know what the strangest thing is?" Mom said eventually. "I think Derek actually did us all a favor in a twisted way. If he hadn't pushed things so far, if he hadn't been quite so greedy and manipulative, we might have all just continued in that unhealthy pattern indefinitely. Tyler and Madison might never have learned to stand on their own feet. I might never have realized I could be happy living somewhere smaller and simpler. You might never have learned to set boundaries with family members who take advantage of your generosity." She was right, though I'd never thought about it that way before. Derek's excessive greed had ultimately been his downfall and everyone else's liberation. If he'd been satisfied with just having free room and board, if he hadn't pushed for more and more money every month, the situation might have continued for years, slowly draining everyone involved. "He couldn't help himself," I said. "Derek always had to push things too far, had to see how much he could get away with. It's like he was incapable of being satisfied with a good thing." "That's addiction behavior," Mom observed. "Not to substances, but to getting something for nothing, to being taken care of without having to reciprocate. He was addicted to being irresponsible, and like any addict, he kept needing more and more to get the same satisfaction." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the desert sky. Finally, Mom spoke again. "I'm proud of you, Jake, for setting those boundaries, for refusing to enable Derek's behavior, even when it was difficult and painful. And I'm proud of Tyler and Madison for growing up to be such fine young people despite their father's influence. Sometimes the best thing you can give someone is the gift of consequences." 6 months later, I got another call from Tyler. Derek had been released from prison after serving 10 months of his sentence, and he was already back to his old patterns. He'd moved in with his elderly aunt in Tucson and was apparently trying to convince her that he'd learned his lesson and just needed a little help getting back on his feet. "Some people never learn," Tyler said, with a resignation that sounded far too mature for someone who was still in his early 20s. "Dad's 70-year-old aunt is supporting him now, just like Sandra did, just like you did. He's got her paying for his food and his cigarettes while he looks for work and complains about age discrimination in the job market. Are you going to try to warn her?" Madison and I talked about it, but we decided no. Aunt Helen is an adult who can make her own choices, even if they're bad ones. And honestly, trying to save people from Dad's manipulation just makes us participants in his drama. The best thing we can do is stay out of it and focus on building our own lives. That wisdom, the recognition that you can't save people from their own poor judgment, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them experience the consequences of their choices, was something it had taken me years to learn. Tyler and Madison had figured it out in their early 20s. How's Madison doing with all this? She's amazing. Just got accepted to a master's program in aerospace engineering at MIT. Full scholarship plus a stipend for living expenses. She's going to study satellite design and orbital mechanics. Dad used to tell her that girls weren't good at math and science, that she should focus on finding a nice husband to take care of her. I wish he could see her now. I smiled, thinking about the quiet 14-year-old who'd done her homework at Mom's dining room table while Derek held court in the living room. She's going to change the world, isn't she? Probably. She's already changed mine and Mom's, just by showing us what's possible when someone actually works toward their goals instead of just complaining about obstacles. We talked for a few more minutes about Tyler's plans to apply for officer training school and Madison's excitement about moving to Boston for graduate school. Neither of them mentioned Derek again, and I realized that was probably how it would be from now on. He'd become irrelevant to their lives, a cautionary tale rather than an active presence. As I hung up the phone, I thought about the strange journey we'd all been on since that first night Derek had shown up at Mom's door with his truck full of garbage bags and promises. None of us were the same people we'd been then. Mom had learned she could be happy in a smaller space with less responsibility. Tyler and Madison had learned they could succeed despite their father's negative influence. I'd learned the difference between helping and enabling, between family loyalty and financial exploitation. And Derek? Derek was still Derek, still charming his way into other people's houses, still making promises he had no intention of keeping, still convinced that the world owed him a comfortable living in exchange for his mere existence. Some people never change, never learn, never grow. But sometimes their refusal to change forces everyone around them to evolve in ways they never would have otherwise. In the end, walking away from that dinner table and refusing to fund Derek's permanent vacation had been one of the best decisions I'd ever made. Not because it felt good. It had been painful and difficult and lonely at times. But because it had been right. It had forced everyone involved to either grow up or get left behind. And most of us had chosen to grow up.